Mr. President, may I be recognized?
You're recognized.
It is an honor to be here today to speak to the gentleman from Montgomery who crafted this legislation, and I can appreciate him because he is a legal intellectual. And so I want to just have a brief dialogue. I won't be up here long. Just want to make some remarks about the bill. And as we were in our discussion today, I reflected a little bit about me. I was born in 1990. Okay. I think there's only one other person that was born in 1990, wink, wink, that's here. And in the 4th grade, I had to take Alabama history, and I just loved that class, Alabama history. I learned about our great heritage in Alabama, our contributions to this nation, and just, you know, how great of a state this is. And when I was taking Alabama history, I learned about sharecropping and sharecroppers. And we had a very transparent conversation in class. And I went home and I asked my mother, Mom, have you heard about sharecropping? And she said, you know, those were your great-grandparents. My grandparents were sharecroppers. After that discussion, I did not leave feeling my teacher, who was a white woman, I did not leave that conversation feeling she was racist. I left the classroom more informed. I left the classroom feeling that I had a critical perspective and I had more respect for my teacher for letting us have an honest dialogue. And so my concern about this legislation is that it will stifle those conversations. Earlier today, Cheyenne Webb Christberg was here, and she was recognized. She's the author of the book, Selma Lord Selma. And she was the youngest foot soldier on Bloody Sunday, 7 years old. She grew up with my parents. She is a couple of years older than my parents, but she's in her mid-60s. And I am one generation removed from Jim Crow. It wasn't that long ago. But I just want to remind everybody that we must have these honest conversations. Yesterday, I had the honor of doing the prayer for the Senate. And the church/denomination that shaped my formative years is the AME Zion Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. And they had members such as Sojourner Truth. She was an abolitionist. Harriet Tubman was a member of the church. Reverend Frederick Douglass was a member of the church. Coretta Scott King. And it was founded as the Freedom Church, and it had its origins in abolition, doing the abolition movement. And I always talk about two things. I always talk about Selma and Tuskegee. Tuskegee University was founded on the grounds. We had our first classes at Butler Chapel AME Zion Church. It was a shack and a plantation. And to the state gave Tuskegee $2,000 to have an appropriation to get started. So that's the beauty of our history. But the framework of our discussion, you're going to appreciate this, Senator Barfoot, is de jure versus de facto, right? I think, is that a constitutional law term?
De facto, I think, is by law, and de jure is just because it happens. It is not.
Well, yeah, de jure from purposeful discrimination, yeah, and de facto, that's just the way things are. It happened, it's a separation that exists even though the laws don't require it, but it still persists today. And I just want to just talk about some de facto things that live, because I believe that the de facto, the explicit laws gave way to, well, no, the de jure gave way to the de facto, the way things that they are, right? Y'all lawyers, my lawyers in the de jure have given way to the de facto.
I actually got that wrong. You were right. I had the reverse. So
Yeah, de facto. So I just want to just share a couple of things. I love the Economic Policy Institute. I will encourage you, if you have some downtime, just read some of their articles. And the racial wealth gap is a problem that persists, and it's really permeated in society. There was an article that came out from the EPI, and it said African Americans have made no progress on home ownership, unemployment, and incarceration in over 50 years. Home ownership, fair wages, and liberty are key attributes to living a quality American life. Would you agree with that? However, so far, too many African Americans have not been privy to this aforementioned economic promise, and it has yet to be actualized. For example, redlining. We know what redlining is. The systematic denial of various services by federal government agencies, local governments, as well as the private sector, either directly or through selective of raising prices. People are getting priced out. And that has served as an engine for the racial wealth gap and lack of progress on home ownership. In history, we learned about the Homestead Act. You remember learning about the Homestead Act?
I remember the name. I cannot tell you what it is.
Well, I'll tell you, I will enlighten you. The Homestead Act, initially enacted in 1862, was a series of laws in which the United States government distributed free land to citizens with the premise that they would develop and farm the land.
Is that what it was?
Though the law encouraged former slaves to apply for the program, seldom were they ever accepted. This resulted into a major land grab for white families by more than 100. They got 106 million homes, land. Juxtapose that against only 4,000 to 5,000 claimants for African American families. And I'll send you all the links for this. I want to talk about the Social Security Act of 1935. So this is all de facto. I mean, de jure. This is de jure. I'm going to get it right. Which implemented the New Deal, an initiative that catapulted American families out of the Great Depression. And it excluded from coverage about half the workers in the American economy. And some of these excluded groups were agricultural workers, sharecropping, what my great-grandparents did, and domestic workers, a large percentage who were African American. When African Americans returned home from World War II, they were barred from the greatest economic expansion in United States history, the GI Bill. You got the Tuskegee Airmen. They were denied. I talked about last year how my great-grandfather fought in World War II, and my grandfather too, my mama's dad, denied GI benefits. The GI Bill was sweeping legislation that allowed veterans the opportunity to build homes, finance their college or vocational education, and there are a myriad of opportunities throughout history in which the United States has abdicated its responsibility to protect and ensure economic inclusion for African Americans. I want to talk about voter suppression, and I'm from Selma, so this is near to my heart. The tactics that have been implemented include but are not limited to the closure of polling sites that serve minority communities, gerrymandering, the elimination of early voting. When I lived in Georgia, I could go 2 weeks before election and vote. Not absentee vote, but I'm talking about in-person casting my ballot, going on my lunch break, not having a long line to fight. These efforts are meant to deter turnout and leave people vulnerable for disenfranchisement. And I just want to talk about mass incarceration too for a minute. The 13th Amendment, which you are aware of, 13th Amendment, ratified in 1865, it stated that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment of crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any other place subject to their jurisdiction. The sentiments etched in the 13th Amendment that slavery was abolished, except for people convicted of crimes, gave way to slavery by another name, or vagrancy laws that exploited black men for minor crimes. According to the ACLU, black men receive harsher sentences for lesser crimes like nonviolent drug offenses. 65.4% of prisoners serving life without parole for non-violent offenses are black, while only 17.8% are white, 15.7% are Latino. And I just want to share, I'm wrapping up, Senator Barfoot. You know, for me, divisive concepts are when we don't address these issues. That's divisive for me. As a legislative body, we are called to remedy injustice. And if we don't talk about these issues, how can we remedy them? Do y'all hear me? If we don't talk about the issues, how can we provide a remedy? And that's what I'm afraid this bill will do. If we're not able to talk about these bills, about these issues. Diversity is about enhancing cultural competency. That's what it's about. And this is not, Senator Barfoot, I think you're a fine gentleman and a scholar, okay? But this is not an indictment on you when people call out inequality, and it just is not an indictment on any white person. It's an indictment on unjust systems. And I don't want anybody in this room to forget that. It is not about individuals. It is not about people. It is about addressing systems. Thank you, and I yield.